Hi friends, welcome back. We're ready to start a brand new book. My name is Christina. I'm the manager at the Pacific Beach Library, and I am excited to embark on a new reading adventure with you. We are going today to start Roughing It by Mark Twain, originally published in 1872. Roughing It is Mark Twain's, they say semi-autobiographical, rather autobiographical, but maybe a little bit fanciful and embellished upon, recounting of his adventures touring the Wild West in the 1860s when he went across to Nevada, and then later on he goes out to Hawaii at some point too. We are going to have a good time reading this one. I will say there are some differences between the two editions that I got. This one that I'm going to read from is the Oxford Mark Twain, and it's a really neat thing that they've done. They actually have it as a facsimile of the original production, the original book. So again, when the original book came out in 1872, this has the illustrations, and it actually has over 300 illustrations. I'm a little bummed y'all won't get to see it, but you can see like the fun fonts and everything like that too. It has, it's a reproduction of the original publication from 1872. Again, as I said, illustrations mixed in. And this one has, just skimming the table of contents, I think it was 72 chapters versus this other edition that I got today from the library that says it's also the original text, and it has only 40-something chapters. And so somewhere along the line, there's some discrepancies in here, and I'm not sure if they've left out chapters or if they've just enumerated them differently. I think they probably left some out because this book is about 600 some pages and this is about 200 and change. So I think that we're going to read from this one. Like I said, it's a facsimile of the original 1872. I'll do a little more research in the next couple of days to find out where the differences are. Like, was it the lack of illustrations that made this one so much shorter, or did they actually drop the last 30 some chapters for this other edition? But we're going to read from the long one to start us out. I also wanted to go ahead and share my fancy tea with you today. I didn't brew it yet because I was telling some of the folks that came to yesterday's tea party, and again, thank you for everybody that read Emma with me and that came to the discussion yesterday, or if you're able to watch the film on Saturday. I'm glad we got to do that. Let's see. So what I was mentioning though when I did the tea party yesterday was I had a special tea. Our custodian here at the library is from Vietnam, and he and his wife had brought back, after she had her last visit there, she brought back some bags of different teas. And so each of the little bags has different individual teas. And this one, just looking at it, I had this in my tea yesterday too, so it's a little bit of rock sugar. And so that one will dissolve in that and instantly sweeten. I believe, yeah, this is lemongrass. I've got some dried oranges in this one. Let me just show that one. Definitely some dried oranges. And then I have no idea what these petals are. This is something. No idea. Ooh, I can see some folks like Diana saying she watched the film on Saturday. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was such a treat for us, getting to show. We haven't done a film screening since. Okay, I have no idea what this fruit is in there too, but it'll be exciting. And I'm not sure if this is just another thicker chunk of lemongrass or something else, but really exciting little tea, mystery tea. I'm going to go ahead and throw my water on and let that steep while we talk a bit more about the book, which I should have been doing that the whole time we were talking about the book, but I got excited about the book, as often happens. So we'll just let this one steep for a few minutes. I hope you guys have something fun to enjoy today too. I was almost thinking I should try to find, like, is there some sort of cowboy tea? Like, what would be the tea of going out to the adventure? Oh yes. Oh, sorry, Helen was commenting on my tea. So I actually have a little bit of special sugar left over because she brought back also from Vietnam these little sugar cubes, and this one has, I think it's a little bit of fruit in the middle. I don't know what it is even, but it's delicious. And so if that one needs a little extra sweetening, I'll break off a little bit more of this chunk and mix it in. But yeah, it was so much fun, and she brought back these really unique teas, and our custodian was saying that these were they make these in the area where his wife is from, and so she brought back like a box of these when she came over this last time, and so he wanted to share with us. But I just thought that was so beautiful. All right, we'll see how this one reconstitutes itself. All right, well, that's continuing to steep. Yeah, so the book Roughing It it has the adventures, and it has keep in mind, based in fact, but it's Mark Twain. If you've read any other of Mark Twain's writings, you'll know he is a humorist, and he likes to stretch things a little bit. And so I'm hoping that we're going to find a lot of exaggeration in these stories, a bit of tall tales to amuse us. And That'll be really fun. I'm not sure, because this will be my first time reading it, how much he goes into the background, so I thought I'd just share a little bit of what I read in the introduction. So this story was actually written around 1870, and it was one of 3 travelogues that Mark Twain wrote, the others being The Innocents Abroad and... what was the other one? Oh dear, now I'm going to forget. The Innocents Abroad, this one, and he had another one as well. Oh well, 3 travelogues. If anyone else wants to comment on what the other one was, that would be great. Let's see. This one, so the story takes place in the 1860s, and it says that he had briefly joined, it says, let me find this thing again. It was kind of funny how they said it. He had briefly joined in the Confederate Army, I think it was, he said. Let's see if we can find this. Oh dear. Oh, this is terrible. Now, you read just a little bit and then not enough to remember. So, okay, here's I'm going to go with what I think it said. I believe it said that he joined the Confederate Army and he was in for about 2 weeks. They did a lot of retreating, and he wasn't devoted to the cause or anything like that. And so he ended up leaving the army, and then his brother had just been appointed to a position in the government in Nevada. And so he went across to Nevada, and he thought it was going to be about 3 months that he would be gone. He ended up being out west for about 6 years. Of course, when I read that line, I had thought of Gilligan's Island, going on the 3-hour tour and then coming back years later. And so similar kind of thing with Mark Twain. He went out for a 3-month tour of the Nevadas of the West and ended up staying for 7 or 8 years. And so those are the stories that he tells in these in this book in Roughing It. And so, you know what? I'm gonna let my tea steep a little while longer. I don't know if you guys can, I don't think you can see that very well. It is starting to expand out, getting a little bit of blush of color. I'm gonna go ahead and start reading, because I don't want to make you guys wait, since I was start steeping my tea a bit late. But I'm gonna start with a little bit extra than I usually do. I wanted to read the little preface by the author, as well as the dedication, because from what I gather, the dedication is to a friend of his, and it references one of the stories that we're going to get later on in the book about the brief time when they thought they were going to be millionaires. So let's go ahead and start with those. The dedication is to Calvin H. Higbee of California, an honest man, a genial comrade, and a steadfast friend. This book is inscribed by the author in memory of the curious time when we too were millionaires for 10 days. So we'll get that story later on in the book. Here's the prefatory, which I think means preface. This book is merely a personal narrative and not a pretentious history or philosophical dissertation. It is a record of several years of variegated vagabondizing, and its object is rather to help the resting reader while away an idle hour than afflict him with metaphysics or goad him with science. Still, there is information in the volume. Information concerning an interesting episode in the history of the Far West, about which no books have been written by persons who were on the ground in person and saw the happenings of the time with their own eyes. I allude to the rise, growth, and culmination of the silver mining fever in Nevada, a curious episode in some respects, the only one of its peculiar kind that has occurred in the land, and the only one, indeed, that is likely to occur in it. Yes, take it all around. There is quite a good deal of information in the book. I regret this very much. But really, it could not be helped. Information appears to stew out of me naturally, like the precious ottar of roses out of the otter. Sometimes it has seemed to me that I would give worlds if I could retain my facts, but it cannot be. The more I caulk up the sources and the tighter I get, the more I leak wisdom. Therefore, I can only claim indulgence at the hands of the reader, not justification. Signed, the author. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm also going to mention too, I don't know if you guys want to get these little descriptions. At the actual chapter headings, it just says chapter 1 and it goes forward. But on the table of contents, it has a brief description of the various chapters. I'm just going to read you the extended one for chapter 1, and then I think I'll not do it for the rest of the ones because I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but just so you can get a feel for what it would be. Chapter 1, my brother appointed Secretary of Nevada. I envy his prospective adventures. Am appointed private secretary under him. My contentment complete. Packed in 1 hour, dreams and visions. On the Missouri River, A bully boat. All right, now we've had our little preview. Let's find out how chapter 1 stacks up as we begin our adventure going across the Wild West with Mark Twain in the 1860s, Roughing It by Mark Twain. Today we'll read 3 chapters, chapters 1, 2, and 3, and beginning with chapter 1. My brother had just been appointed Secretary of Nevada Territory, an office of such majesty that it concentrated in itself the duties and dignities of treasurer, comptroller, secretary of state, and acting governor in the governor's absence. A salary of $1,800 a year and the title of Mr. Secretary gave to the great position an air of wild and imposing grandeur. I was young and ignorant, and I envied my brother. I coveted his distinction and his financial splendor, but particularly and especially the long, strange journey he was going to make and the curious new world he was going to explore. He was going to travel. I never had been away from home, and that word, travel, had a seductive charm for me. Pretty soon he would be hundreds and hundreds of miles away on the great plains and deserts and among the mountains of the far west, and would see buffaloes and Indians and prairie dogs and antelopes and have all kinds of adventures and maybe get hanged or scalped and have ever such a fine time and write home and tell us all about it and be a hero. And he would see the gold mines and the silver mines, and maybe go about of an afternoon when his work was done, and pick up 2 or 3 pailfuls of shining slugs and nuggets of gold and silver on the hillside. And by, he would become very rich, and return home by sea, and he would be able to talk as calmly about San Francisco and the ocean and the isthmus, as if it was nothing of any consequence to have seen these marvels face to face. What I suffered in contemplating his happiness, pen cannot describe. And so, when he offered me, in cold blood, the sublime position of private secretary under him, it appeared to me that the heavens and the earth passed away, and the firmament was rolled together as a scroll. I had nothing more to desire. My contentment was complete. At the end of an hour or 2, I was ready for the journey. Not much packing up was necessary because we were going in the overland stage from the Missouri frontier to Nevada, and passengers were only allowed a small quantity of baggage apiece. There was no Pacific Railroad in those fine times of 10 or 12 years ago. Not a single rail of it. I only proposed to stay in Nevada 3 months. I had no thought of staying longer than that. I meant to see all I could that was new and strange and then hurry home to business. I little thought that I would not see the end of that 3-month pleasure excursion for 6 or 7 uncommonly long years. I dreamt all night about Indians, deserts, and silver bars, and in due time, next day, we took shipping at the St. Louis wharf on board a steamboat bound up the Missouri River. We were 6 days going from St. Louis to St. Joe, a trip that was so dull and sleepy and eventless that it has left no more impression on my memory than if its duration had been 6 minutes instead of that many days. No record is left in my mind now concerning it, but a confused jumble of savage-looking snags which we deliberately walked over with one wheel or the other, and of reefs which we butted and then retired from and climbed over in some softer place, and of sandbars which we roosted on occasionally and rested, and then got out our crutches and sparred over. In fact, the boat might almost as well have gone to St. Joe by land, for she was walking most of the time anyhow, climbing over reefs and clambering over snags patiently and laboriously all day long. The captain said she was a bully boat, and all she wanted was more sheer and a bigger wheel. I thought she wanted a pair of stilts, but I had the deep sagacity not to say so. All right, chapter 2. The first thing we did on that glad evening that landed us at St. Joseph was to hunt up the stage office and pay $150 apiece for tickets per overland coach to Carson City, Nevada. The next morning, bright and early, we took a hasty breakfast and hurried to the starting place. Then an inconvenience presented itself which we had not properly appreciated before, namely, that one cannot make a heavy traveling truck stand for 25 pounds of luggage because it weighs a good deal more. But that was all we could take. 25 pounds each. So we had to snatch our trunks open and make a selection in a good deal of a hurry. We put our lawful 25 pounds apiece all in one valise and shipped the trunks back to St. Louis again. It was a sad parting, for now we had no swallowtail coats and white kid gloves to wear at Pawnee receptions in the Rocky Mountains, and no stovepipe hats, nor patent leather boots, nor anything else necessary to make life calm and peaceful. We were reduced to a war footing. Each of us put on a rough, heavy suit of clothing, woolen army shirt and stogie boots included, and into the valise we crowded a few white shirts, some underclothing, and such things. My brother, the secretary, took along about 4 pounds of United States statutes and 6 pounds of unabridged dictionary, for we did not know, poor innocents, that such things could be bought in San Francisco on one day and received in Carson City the next. I was armed to the teeth with a pitiful little Smith & Wesson 7-shooter, which carried a ball like a homeopathic pill. And it took the whole 7 to make a dose for an adult. But I thought it was grand. It appeared to me to be a dangerous weapon. It only had one fault. You could not hit anything with it. One of our conductors practiced a while on a cow with it, and as long as she stood still and behaved herself, she was safe. But as soon as she went to moving about and he got to shooting at other things, she came to grief. The secretary had a small-sized Colt's revolver strapped around him for protection against the Indians, and to guard against accidents, he carried it uncapped. Mr. George Bemis was dismally formidable. George Bemis was our fellow traveler. We had never seen him before. He wore in his belt an old original Allen revolver, such as irreverent people call a pepper box, simply drawing the trigger back, cocked, and fired the pistol. As the trigger came back, the hammer would begin to rise and the barrel to turn over, and presently down would drop the hammer, and away would speed the ball. To aim along the turning barrel and hit the thing aimed at was a feat which was probably never done with an Allen in the world. But George's was a reliable weapon nevertheless, because as one of the stage drivers afterward said, if she didn't get what she went after, she would fetch something else. And so she did. She went after a deuce of spades nailed against a tree once, and fetched a mule standing about 30 yards to the left of it. Bemis did not want the mule, but the owner came out with a double-barreled shotgun and persuaded him to buy it anyhow. It was a cheerful weapon, the Allen. Sometimes all its 6 barrels would go off at once, and then there was no safe place in all the region round about, but behind it. We took 2 or 3 blankets for protection against frosty weather in the mountains. In the matter of luxuries, we were modest. We took none along but some pipes and 5 pounds of smoking tobacco. We had 2 large canteens to carry water in between stations on the plains, and we also took with us a little shot bag of silver coin for daily expenses in the way of breakfasts and dinners. By 8 o'clock, everything was ready, and we were on the other side of the river. We jumped into the stage, the driver cracked his whip, and we bowled away and left the States behind us. It was a superb summer morning, and all the landscape was brilliant with sunshine. There was a freshness and breeziness too, and an exhilarating sense of emancipation from all sorts of cares and responsibilities that almost made us feel that the years we had spent in the close, hot city, toiling and slaving, had been wasted and thrown away. We were spinning along through Kansas, and in the course of an hour and a half we were fairly abroad on the Great Plains. Just here the land was rolling, a grand sweep of regular elevations and depressions as far as the eye could reach, like the stately heave and swell of the ocean's bosom after a storm. And everywhere were cornfields, accenting with squares of deeper green this limitless expanse of grassy land. But presently the sea upon dry ground was to lose its rolling character and stretch away for 700 miles as level as a floor. Our coach was a great swinging and swaying stage of the most sumptuous description, an imposing cradle on wheels. It was drawn by 6 handsome horses, and by the side of the driver sat the conductor, the legitimate captain of the craft, for it was his business to take charge and care of the mails, baggage, express matter, and passengers. We 3 were the only passengers this trip. We sat on the back seat inside. About all the rest of the coach was full of mail bags, for we had 3 days' delayed mails with us. Almost touching our knees, a perpendicular wall of mail matter rose up to the roof. There was a great pile of it strapped on top of the stage, and both the fore and hind boots were full. We had 2,700 pounds of it aboard, the driver said. A little for Brigham and Carson and Frisco, but the heft of it for the Injuns, which is powerful troublesome, thought they get plenty of truck to read. But as he had just then got up a fearful convulsion of his countenance, which was suggestive of a wink being swallowed by an earthquake, we guessed that his remark was intended to be facetious, and to mean that we would unload the most of our mail matter somewhere on the plains, and leave it to the Indians, or whosoever wanted it. We changed horses every 10 miles, all day long, and fairly flew over the hard level road. We jumped out and stretched our legs every time the coach stopped, and so the night found us still vivacious and unfatigued. After supper, a woman got in, who lived about 50 miles further on, and we three had to take turns at sitting outside with the driver and conductor. Apparently, she was not a talkative woman. She would sit there in the gathering twilight and fasten her steadfast eyes on a mosquito rooting into her arm. And slowly she would raise her other hand till she had got his range, and then she would launch a slap at him that would have jolted a cow. And after that she would sit and contemplate the corpse with tranquil satisfaction, for she never missed her mosquito. She was a dead shot at short range. She never removed a carcass, but left them there for bait. I sat by this grim sphinx and watched her kill 30 or 40 mosquitoes, watched her and waited for her to say something, but she never did. So I finally opened the conversation myself. I said, "The mosquitoes are pretty bad about here, madam." "You bet." "What did I understand you to say, madam?" "You bet." Then she cheered up and faced round and said, "Danged if I didn't begin to think you fellers was deef and dumb. I did, b'gosh. Here I've sought and sought and sought, a-busted mosquitoes and wonderin' what was ailin' ye. Fust I thought you was deef and dumb, then I thought you was sick or crazy or suthin', and then by and by I begin to reckon you was a passel of sickly folks that couldn't think of nothin' to say. Where'd ye come from?" The Sphinx was a sphinx no more. The fountains of her great deep were broken up, and she rained the 9 parts of speech, 40 days and 40 nights, metaphorically speaking, and buried us under a desolating deluge of trivial gossip that left not a crag or pinnacle of rejoinder projecting above the tossing waste of dislocated grammar and decomposed pronunciation. How we suffered. She went on, hour after hour, till I was sorry I ever opened the mosquito question and gave her a start. She never did stop again until she got to her journey's end towards daylight, and then she stirred us up as she was leaving the stage, for we were nodding by that time, and said, "Now, you get out at Cottonwood, you fellers, and lay over a couple of days, and I'll be along sometime tonight, and if I can do you any good by edging in a word now and then, I'm right thar. Folks'll tell you I've always been kind of offish and particular for a gal that's raised in the woods, and I am, with the ragtag and bobtail, and a gal has to be if she wants to be anything. But when people comes along, which is my equals, I reckon I'm a pretty sociable heifer after all." We resolved not to lay by at Cottonwood. And before we begin chapter 3, I just want to respond. There was a little note. Larissa was asking if this is recorded and posted later. Yes, it'll be available to view later in the Facebook group. And so you can come back and watch it later on. All right. Also, my tea has a slight taste that reminds me of Fruit Loops. It's kind of great. All right. Chapter 3. About an hour and a half before daylight, we were bowling along smoothly over the road. So smoothly that our cradle only rocked in a gentle, lulling way that was gradually soothing us to sleep and dulling our consciousness, when something gave way under us. We were dimly aware of it, but indifferent to it. The coach stopped. We heard the driver and conductor talking together outside and rummaging for a lantern and swearing because they could not find it. But we had no interest in whatever had happened, and it only added to our comfort to think of those people out there at work in the murky night, and we, snug in our nest with the curtains drawn. But presently, by the sounds, there seemed to be an examination going on, and then the driver's voice said, "By George, the thoroughbrace is broke." This startled me broad awake, as an undefined sense of calamity is always apt to do. I said to myself, now, a thoroughbrace is probably part of a horse, and doubtless a vital part too, from the dismay in the driver's voice. Leg, maybe? And yet how could he break his leg waltzing along such a road as this? No, it can't be his leg. That is impossible, unless he was reaching for the driver. Now, what can be the thoroughbrace of a horse, I wonder? Well, whatever comes, I shall not air my ignorance in this crowd anyway. Just then the conductor's face appeared at a lifted curtain, and his lantern glared in on us and our wall of mail matter. And he said, "Gents, you'll have to turn out a spell. Thoroughbraces broke." We climbed out into a chill drizzle and felt ever so homeless and dreary. When I found that the thing they called a thoroughbrace was the massive combination of belts and springs which the coach rocks itself on, or in, I said to the driver, "I never saw a thoroughbrace used up like that before that I can remember. How did it happen?" "Why, it happened by trying to make one coach carry 3 days' mail. That's how it happened," said he. "And right here is the very direction which is wrote on all the newspaper bags which was to be put out for the Injuns for to keep 'em quiet. It's most uncommon lucky, because it's so nation dark I should have gone by unbeknowns if that air thoroughbrace hadn't broke." I knew that he was in labor with another of those winks of his, though I could not see his face, because he was bent down at work, and wishing him a safe delivery, I turned to and helped the rest get out the mail sacks. It made a great pyramid by the roadside when it was all set out. When they had mended the thoroughbrace, we filled the 2 boots again, but put no mail on top, and only half as much inside as there was before. The conductor bent all the seat backs down, and then we filled the coach just half full of mail bags from end to end. We objected loudly to this, for it left us no seats. But the conductor was wiser than we and said a bed was better than seats, and moreover this plan would protect his thoroughbraces. We never wanted any seats after that. The lazy bed was infinitely preferable. I had many an exciting day subsequently, lying on it, reading the statutes in the dictionary, and wondering how the characters would turn out. The conductor said he would send back a guard from the next station to take care of the abandoned mailbags, and we drove on. It was now just dawn, and as we stretched our cramped legs full length on the mail sacks and gazed out through the windows across the wide wastes of greensward clad in cool, powdery mist to where there was an expectant look in the eastern horizon, our perfect enjoyment took the form of a tranquil and contented ecstasy. The stage whirled along at a spanking gait, the breeze flapping curtains and suspended coats in a most exhilarating way. The cradle swayed and swung luxuriously, the pattering of the horse's hooves, the cracking of the driver's whip, and his hi-ya, glang, were music. The spinning ground and the waltzing trees appeared to give us a mute hurrah as we went by, and then slack up and look after us with interest or envy or something. And as we lay and smoked the pipe of peace and compared all this luxury with the years of tiresome city life that had gone before it, we felt that there was only one complete and satisfying happiness in the world, and we had found it. After breakfast, at some station whose name I have forgotten, we 3 climbed up on the seat behind the driver and let the conductor have our bed for a nap. And by, when the sun made me drowsy, I lay down on my face on top of the coach, grasping the slender iron railing, and slept for an hour or more. That will give one an appreciable idea of those matchless roads. Instinct will make a sleeping man grip a fast hold of the railing when the stage jolts, but when it only swings and sways, no grip is necessary. Overland drivers and conductors used to sit in their places and sleep 30 or 40 minutes at a time on good roads while spinning along at the rate of 8 or 10 miles an hour. I saw them do it often. There was no danger about it. A sleeping man will seize the irons in time when the coach jolts. These men were hard worked, and it was not possible for them to stay awake all the time. By, we passed through Marysville and over the Big Blue and Little Sandy, thence about a mile and entered Nebraska. About a mile further on, we came to the Big Sandy, 180 miles from St. Joseph. As the sun was going down, we saw the first specimen of an animal known familiarly over 2,000 miles of mountain and desert, from Kansas clear to the Pacific Ocean, as the Jackass Rabbit. He is well named. He is just like any other rabbit, except that he is from 1/3 to twice as large, has longer legs in proportion to his size, and has the most preposterous ears that ever were mounted on any creature but a jackass. When he is sitting quiet thinking about his sins, or is absent-minded or unapprehensive of danger, his majestic ears project above him conspicuously. But the breaking of a twig will scare him nearly to death, and then he tilts his ears back gently or starts for home. All you can see then for the next minute is his long gray form, stretched out straight and streaking it through the low sagebrush, head erect, eyes right, and ears just canted a little to the rear, but showing you where the animal is all the time, the same as if he carried a jib. Now and then he makes a marvelous spring with his long legs, high over the stunted sagebrush, and scores a leap that would make a horse envious. Presently he comes down to a long, graceful lope, and shortly he mysteriously disappears. He is crouched behind a sagebrush and will sit there and listen and tremble until you get within 6 feet of him, when he will get under way again. But one must shoot at this creature once if he wishes to see him throw his heart into his heels and do the best he knows how. He is frightened clear through now, and he lays his long ears down on his back, straightens himself out like a yardstick every spring he makes, and scatters miles behind him with an easy indifference that is enchanting. Our party made this specimen hump himself, as the conductor said. The secretary started him with a shot from the Colt. I commenced spitting at him with my weapon, and all in the same instant the old Allen's whole broadside let go with a rattling crash, and it is not putting it too strong to say that the rabbit was frantic. He dropped his ears, set up his tail, and left for San Francisco at a speed which can only be described as a flash and a vanish. Long after he was out of sight, we could hear him whiz. I do not remember where we first came across sagebrush, but as I have been speaking of it, I may as well describe it. This is easily done, for if the reader can imagine a gnarled and venerable live oak tree reduced to a little shrub 2 feet high with its rough bark, its foliage, its twisted boughs all complete, he can picture the sagebrush exactly. Often, on lazy afternoons in the mountains, I have lain on the ground with my face under a sage bush and entertained myself with fancying that the gnats among its foliage were Lilliputian birds, and that the ants marching and counter-marching about its base were Lilliputian flocks and herds, and myself some vast loafer from Brobdingnag, waiting to catch a little citizen and eat him. It is an imposing monarch of the forest in exquisite miniature, is the sagebrush. Its foliage is a grayish green and gives that tint to desert and mountain. It smells like our domestic sage, and sage tea made from it tastes like the sage tea which all boys are so well acquainted with. The sagebrush is a singularly hardy plant and grows right in the midst of deep sand and among barren rocks, where nothing else in the vegetable world would try to grow, except bunch grass. The sage bushes grow from 3 to 6 or 7 feet apart, all over the mountains and deserts of the far west, clear to the borders of California. There is not a tree of any kind in the deserts for hundreds of miles. There is no vegetation at all in a regular desert except the sagebrush and its cousin, the greasewood, which is so much like the sagebrush that the difference amounts to little. Campfires and hot suppers in the deserts would be impossible but for the friendly sagebrush. Its trunk is as large as a boy's wrist, and from that up to a man's arm, and its crooked branches are half as large as its trunk, all good, sound, hard wood, very like oak. When a party camps, the first thing to be done is to cut sagebrush, and in a few minutes there is an opulent pile of it ready for use. A hole a foot wide, 2 feet deep, and 2 feet long is dug, and sagebrush chopped up and burned in it till it is full to the brim with glowing coals. Then the cooking begins, and there is no smoke, and consequently, no swearing. Such a fire will keep all night with very little replenishing, and it makes a very sociable campfire, and one around which the most impossible reminiscences sound plausible, instructive, and profoundly entertaining. Sagebrush is very fair fuel, but as a vegetable, it is a distinguished failure. Nothing can abide the taste of it but the jackass and his illegitimate child, the mule. But their testimony and its nutritiousness is worth noting, but their testimony to its nutritiousness is worth nothing, for they will eat pine knots or anthracite coal or brass filings or lead pipe or old bottles or anything that comes handy, and then go off looking as grateful as if they had had oysters for dinner. Mules and donkeys and camels have appetites that anything will relieve temporarily, but nothing satisfy. In Syria, once, at the headwaters of the Jordan, a camel took charge of my overcoat while the tents were being pitched, and examined it with a critical eye, all over, with as much interest as if he had an idea of getting one made like it. And then, after he was lifted one of the sleeves out with his teeth and chewed at it, gradually taking it in, and all the while opening and closing his eyes in a kind of religious ecstasy, as if he had never tasted anything as good as an overcoat before in his life. Then he smacked his lips once or twice and reached after the other sleeve. Next, he tried the velvet collar and smiled a smile of such contentment that it was plain to see that he regarded that as the daintiest thing about an overcoat. The tails went next, along with some percussion caps and cough candy and some fig paste from Constantinople. And then my newspaper correspondence dropped out, and he took a chance in that. Manuscript letters written for the home papers. But he was treading on dangerous ground now. He began to come across solid wisdom in those documents that was rather weighty on his stomach, and occasionally he would take a joke that would shake him up till it loosened his teeth. It was getting to be perilous times with him, but he held his grip with good courage and hopefully, till at last he began to stumble on statements that not even a camel could swallow with impunity. He began to gag and gasp, and his eyes to stand out and his forelegs to spread. In about a quarter of a minute, he fell over as stiff as a carpenter's workbench and died a death of indescribable agony. I went and pulled the manuscript out of his mouth and found that the sensitive creature had choked to death on one of the mildest and gentlest statements of fact that I ever laid before a trusting public. I was about to say, when diverted from my subject, that occasionally one finds sage bushes 5 or 6 feet high and with a spread of branch and foliage in proportion, but 2 or 2.5 feet is the usual height. I'm going to end our reading for today because the next chapter is very long and I don't want to push it over an hour. Thank you for joining me today. Yes, I think we might want to look up sage tea, whether we can make it ourselves out of our sage plants that we apparently grow all the way to the California coast. So, I'm sure you can just walk outside and find some sage. Or maybe there's actually some sage tea that we can get at the store, but we're roughing it now, all right? I'm just saying, if you want to rough it, we can look up some recipes for making our own sage tea. We'll do some more reading tomorrow. I will try to get a better handle on how long the different chapters are so we can make sure we're right within our, just under an hour range. But yeah, thank you for joining me today for the start of Roughing It. I am looking forward to seeing what it was like traveling across the Wild West back when it was a little more wild, back when we could actually travel. Oh, this is exciting times. And I'll look forward to seeing you more tomorrow. And I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful tea. And I just want to give one last props also. This book was nominated by one of our longtime members, Judy, who is not here with us today, I think, because she is celebrating her birthday. So I want to say happy birthday to Judy. And thank you to everybody who voted on this one. I'm excited to read it for the first time with you guys. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Bye.